everybody can hear me now. I really do apologize. I think that I have been muted. So I just to, by way of a background, we like to say we provide a $1 million lab for every student, anytime, anywhere. And we had our origin in Denmark at the University of Copenhagen, where our co-founder was finding some challenges while teaching some science courses there. And he found that using, simulations helped address some specific challenges that he was seeing. And as we grew as a company, we found that simulations were a great way to address some other challenges across the board. Things like knowledge gaps between and among students, access to lab space or limited access to lab space. Certainly that was an issue during the pandemic. Students not appropriately engaged, or coming to the lab not adequately prepared, or lacking that conceptual understanding in order to get, maximize the results of a lab. So we found that simulations were a great way to address some of these concerns. As teachers, you probably could add to those challenges as well. We like to think we address all of those very significantly. So excuse me. So right now, our platform contains over 200 simulations. Each of these is a gamified case study that covers 1 to 2 lectures worth of material and 1 lab practical session. Typically, they take about 30 to 45 minutes to complete. Each simulation is built around a storyline that links abstract theory and techniques covered to a real-world application. As a student, I'm going to be responsible for completing every step that I would need to complete in a real wet lab. So in doing so, I'm constantly learning and reinforcing lab protocols, particularly around safety. Instead of, though, being just a digitized version of a real lab, the platform allows students to learn in ways not possible in a lab environment. And we do this by incorporating things like interactive cellular and molecular visualizations, multiple choice quiz questions that are scattered throughout the simulation for that formative assessment piece. And probably most importantly, we give students the ability to change variables, to make mistakes, and in doing so, expand their critical thinking skills and conceptual understanding. Each of the simulations is auto-graded, and the platform can be integrated into your institution's LMS. We integrate with all the major LMSs out there. I should mention as well that real-world connection is a really critical piece, because it not only allows students to link abstract theory and techniques covered in a lab to a real-world application, but those real-world applications are really exciting for students. Things like saving the environment, or supporting a mission on Mars, or solving a crime, any number of things. So let's jump into the faculty resource page. We'll do a little bit more of a deep dive into the resources that we have. And when we're finished here, you will probably be contacted by your specific sales rep. And you should ask him or her to give you access to the faculty resources so you can look at them more closely than we will be able to here with the limited time that we have. But just to show you what it's all about, basically, our faculty resource page has 4 tabs. You're going to land on the What's New tab. I mentioned we have over 200 simulations at this point. We're always adding to those. And so this tab will show you what's new, what's coming down the pike. We're very excited about our video and image library for using this in the classroom, as well as our new lab supplements of lab reports and the manuals. And then what's coming down the pike later on is always on this tab as well. So you'll get what's new and exciting at Labster on this tab. On the Getting Started tab, I would suggest that once you get access to the faculty resources, you take a look at that little introductory video. We'll do a little walkthrough, a reminder of what we've covered today. I'm going to skip simulations for a minute and go to Teacher Resources. On our Teacher Resources tab, you're going to see pretty much all things Labster, okay, what we're about as a company, how to teach with Labster. We were able, because of the pandemic, we ended up being the go-to replacement lab, the online resource or replacement for the physical lab because people were not allowed to go into classrooms. But you might be interested to know that we actually were designed and always intended to be used in tandem with regular classroom instruction. And so there's any number of ways to teach with Labster. You can use it as a pre-lab exercise, a post-lab exercise, flipped classroom. You can use it for independent work, or even in the classroom setting. So there's any number of ways to teach with Labster. Those are available here. Our pedagogy and our methodology is backed up by over 15 peer-reviewed research papers. That research is also available here for you. And if you need anything more, we also have technical requirements and the rest here. But if you want more, just click down below where it says here, you're going to be brought to another resources page. And you're going to see all of the resources we offer teachers. One of these, very interestingly enough, is our conference, So Inspired, So meaning Science Online, Inspired Conference in the fall. We had a great conference for high school and higher ed science educators. And I'm very happy to say that you are cordially invited to our summer event, which is tomorrow. So if you go to labster.com, please feel free, if you haven't already done so, to register for our free So Uplifted conference. So I strongly recommend that you do that. Great information from your peers and some really exciting sessions that we're planning on for that conference tomorrow. Now, of course, the meat of the matter are the simulations. So if you click on the simulations tab, you're going to be brought to where we have all of our simulations very neatly and efficiently laid out here according to categories. But it's important to note that once you get access to this as a teacher, you have access to all 200 plus simulations, and we're adding to those all the time. So you have access to all of it. So if you're a higher ed person and you're in microbiology and you see something in general biology that you want to use, fine. These categories are only done like this for convenience sake. Similarly for high school, you'll see high school biology, chemistry, physics. If you see something in, microbiology that you want to use in biology, by all means. But how we lay it out is we have core simulations that are recommended. These correspond to any sort of general class. And then you'll see, hold on one second here. I just realized that. Sorry, folks. I think. Sorry, folks, having a little technical issue here. One second, please, folks. I really do apologize.
Jesus.
Okay, so you should see now the core simulations. Let me go back a minute in case you didn't see this. Again, I'm so sorry, folks. I didn't realize that you were not seeing my screen. So you're going to land on the faculty resource page. This is what it looks like. Again, I mentioned, what's new is going to be on the new tab. I recommend once you get access from your rep that you take a look at the Getting Started tab here. There's a little intro video. Of course, we have our our teacher resources here, what we're all about, how to teach with Labster, and then also any additional information. Now, what you can do here, hold on, please, is If you click here, you're going to be brought to more resources. And this is where I was alluding to that, the So Inspired conference. And I do recommend that you take a look at labster.com, get on the So Inspired, our new summer event, which is So Uplifted Science Conference. And you can go to labster.com for that. But we have a whole other tab of teacher resources. And of course, as I mentioned before, and again, so sorry that you weren't seeing this earlier, you're going to see the simulations broken down into various categories. You have access to all of it. As I mentioned before, these categories are only for convenience sake. If you were to go into, say, for instance, one of these, in this case, high school biology, you're going to see some simulations that are recommended for a core course. And then down below, more advanced treatment or more granular treatment of particular topics, but you have access to everything. And to see everything, you just simply go to the the complete course package here, and you'll see an alphabetized listing of all of the simulations that we have. Before we jump into that though, I just want to point out, we also have translated simulations. If those are required. In some cases, if you have bilingual education and you need translated simulations, we're always adding to those as well. Those are available here. We have a science image library here for use in the classroom. We have a library of science images and 3D visualizations. Animated videos, these basically are snippets that are taken out of particular simulations that we have for use in the classroom, and we're always adding to these as well. These run anywhere from 2 to 10 minutes. They'll take you to the YouTube video, and they're great for use in a classroom if you want to focus on one particular area of a simulation. Lab reports and manuals, I'm going to talk about in a second. So as I mentioned, if you click on complete course package, you're going to see an alphabetized listing of all of the simulations that we have. And you can access any of these here as well as in the thing. So let's do cellular respiration here. And folks, one moment, please. So when you're in the cellular respiration or any simulation while you're on it's going to take you to a screen. If you click on any of these all look exactly the same. Down below, you're going to see an overview of the simulation. And on the right-hand side, you're going to see techniques covered and learning objectives. If you're using this in the classroom, if you scroll down below, you're going to see some screenshots that you can use in the classroom. You're also going to see related simulations. In this particular one, you'll see when we go through it, but we've actually broken this down into sub simulations that cover each of the areas that are in this longer simulation. The theory pages, I mentioned that each simulation is under the underpinning of each simulation is 1 to 2 lecture worth of materials. And you can see that all that material by clicking on the theory pages, and you can do a deep dive into that as well. We have our theory is drawn from a number of sources: OpenStax, McGraw-Hill, Pearson, Wiley, the usual suspects. So we really fit with any curriculum. In addition to that, your students will also have access to the theory page, which we'll talk about in a second. I mentioned the quiz questions that are scattered throughout each simulation. Those are available with or without the answers for download on the teacher site. And the lab reports in the lab manual. Well, the lab manual is simply the overview of the simulation married with the theory pages. Those are put in one document, and you can download that and share it with your students, if you will. The lab report itself is a shareable document. This is where the communicative learning aspect comes in, where your students, it's basically a shell. These are all the same. They're basically just general questions, but you can edit these as you wish. So basically, what you would ask in a lab report: summarize, explain, discuss, but you can tweak those as you wish, and your students can use that as a shareable document. So if you wanted students 2 or 3 to partner together on something, they could easily do it through that. To play the simulation, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can click play simulation here, and it's going to allow you to download the simulation. You're going to see it as your students would, and you can play through it. You can observe outcomes, change variables, all the rest of it. The only thing that I would mention to you is that you're on a teacher platform here. This is a demo platform, which means that it's not going to save any of your work. So if you decide to play through it that way, just be aware that if you stop, you're going to have to start from the very beginning. That will not be the case, obviously, with your students. So another good way to really take a look at a simulation of these video walkthroughs. We had one of our colleagues go through and play through the simulation, answer the quiz question, so it goes through a lot more quickly. So let's take a look here. So I'm going to stop here for a second. I'm going to turn off the sound. I just wanted you to know that the audio is available. Your students can turn it off if they wish. But here's something that's common to all of our simulations. Dr. One is our floating robot, virtual lab assistant. Her job is to keep the students on track, to provide instruction, narration, direction, the quiz questions, poking, prodding, even jokes every once in a while. The other thing that we have that's common to all of our simulations are the lab pad, is the lab pad. The lab pad has 4 tabs on it. The home tab obviously being where most of the instructions and narration and direction is going to be. In this particular case, at the beginning, we're going to find the real world connection. The real world connection here is we're going to be helping the community basketball team. We're going to learn more about that in a few seconds. The theory page is what we talked about earlier. The students also have the access to the theory page. The media tab is where, as they work through a simulation and they have to save work, that is saved on the theory, on the media tab, as well as any supporting charts or graphs or video that they need. The mission tab is simply a list of tasks that they have to perform as they work their way through the simulation. As those are accomplished, they're checked off, so the students can check their progress by either looking at the mission tab and how many tasks they've checked off or completed. They can also check it up here in the upper right as a percentage, how far they are through the simulation. I mentioned the quiz questions earlier, that summative assessment piece that gives your students immediate feedback. That is tracked up here. Quiz questions are worth 10 points each. We're going to talk about them in a second. And they're tracked up here. Obviously, there are 12 questions in this particular simulation. So in our case here, we are going to actually get teleported over to the community basketball team. Oops, sorry. So sorry, not sure what's going on here. We're going to go over to the community basketball team, and we find out that the point guard is feeling very, very lethargic, not quite sure what's going on there, but we know that he got enough sleep, but he skipped the team pasta dinner the night before. So maybe that has something to do with it. We don't know. We're going to get teleported back to the lab. And of course, I mentioned those lab safety protocols. So we're going to have to make sure we put on a lab coat. We're going to make sure we have to put on gloves before we can even get into the lab. Once we get into the lab, we're going to go over to the workbench. And we're going to do some testing of the blood work that we collected, both from the point guard and the captain and our own avatar. We're going to check glucose, lactic acid levels. We're going to do some comparing and contrasting, and we're going to form hypotheses, and then we're going to jump ahead. I mentioned a $1 million lab for every student, anytime, anywhere. One of those aspects is a holotable. So here we are at a holotable, and we're going to learn about glycolysis. And this is one of those hands-on exercises that I was talking about earlier, where we allow students to change variables and make mistakes. We're going to learn about glycolysis here, and build a molecule, and we're going to move ahead to another part of the lab. And we're going to have another exercise to do. In this case, we're going to learn about the Krebs cycle, and we're going to place the molecules in the right order, the right spot. Again, is another one of these adaptive exercises. And then we're going to, I mentioned we have the interactive cellular and molecular visualizations. In this case, we're actually going to get teleported inside the mitochondrion, and we're going to learn about the electron transport chain. So we took a look at glycolysis, we took a look at the Krebs cycle, now we're going into the electron transport chain. When we come out of that, we're going to get teleported out, and we're going to go over to back to the lab, and with the help of our lab rat here and a respirometer, we're going to check oxygen levels, oxygen consumption levels. Sorry, let me go back a second here. Sorry, my mouse is sticking here, folks. So I mentioned the quizzes. I forgot to go over this earlier. So the quiz questions are worth 10 points each. If I get an answer wrong, the point value goes down by 2 each time, and the answers are jumbled around. The answers are always randomized anyway, so if I'm using this in the classroom, it's important to note that it's unlikely that 2 students sitting next to each other would have the same ABCD configuration. But if I'm answering this, I get the answer correct, I get 10 points. Yes, it's correct. This is why it's correct. If I don't, it goes down by 2 each time. I cannot move forward until I answer that question. And then the other thing to note is I have access to the theory page at any time. So I can always just go in and check the theory, and it will give me enough information to answer that question correctly. I don't have to, but if I don't and I get the answer wrong, Dr. One's going to nudge me and say, hey, why don't you go ahead and check that theory page out. Okay. So after we check our respirometer and we check the oxygen consumption levels, we're going to find out at the very end that there really isn't anything wrong with the point guard, that actually it's just a matter of, oxygen levels and glucose levels increase as energy requirements increase. And so he probably just shouldn't have skipped that tea and pasta dinner. That quick overview of one of our simulations. Again, I would encourage you, if you're contacted by your sales rep, to ask them to give you access to the faculty resource page so you can look at it a little bit more closely on your own. And as far as building it into your course, there's any number of ways that Labster can be used. As I alluded to earlier, you can use it as your online lab, as the principal lab, of course, for virtual classes, virtual courses. You can also use it in a flipped classroom environment. You can use it as a pre-lab exercise or a post-lab exercise, independent work. There's any number of ways that Labster can fit into a course. But I also mentioned that we really were designed to be used in conjunction with traditional teaching. So back in 2014, we did a study with 160 students from the Technical University of Denmark and Stanford Online High School. And we looked at results in learning outcomes with traditional teaching alone, Labster alone, and traditional teaching with Labster. And we found that when used with traditional teaching and Labster combined, learning outcomes increased by over 100%. Not only that, but whether it was used as a pre-exercise or a post-lab exercise, the outcomes were the same. That as far as retention of knowledge goes, 40 days after the students took the exam, they retained 100% of the information that they had learned. Another significant outcome in the use of Labster has to do with a study we did in 2016 with BMC Medicine. And we looked at 3 areas. knowledge, motivation, and self-efficacy. And we looked at these three areas among three levels of students: your high performing students, your medium knowledge students, and your lower knowledge students. And we found that there were post Labster, there were significant increases across the board in all three areas among all three groups. But the most significant change was in the knowledge area. And you'll note here on the left that there was a significant closing of what we used to be called the achievement gap or the knowledge gap by about 20% between your highest performing students and your lower performing students by using Labster. In terms of access, again, when you are contacted by your sales rep, please request access to the simulations, the faculty resource page, and you can do a deep dive into those as you are able. As far as integration goes, generally it takes us about two weeks to get set up, less than. We integrate with all major LMSs, so there's no issue as far as that concerns. And as far as implementation goes, once we're up and running, your students, as long as they have a desktop or a laptop computer with an updated browser, then they can access Labster anytime, anywhere, coffee shop, classroom, home, library, wherever. No additional plugins required. And that's about it as far as an overview of the resources. I do apologize for the technical issues on my end. I hope that wasn't too off-putting, but we do have time for questions. So if anybody has any questions you'd like to share, by all means, go ahead and put them in. I know we have been asked in the past about use with iPads. Right now, we are not compatible with mobile devices, but we're very excited to say that we're doing a lot of beta testing around the world. And so in spring of 2022, we're expecting that we should have compatibility with iPads. Not telephones yet, but we're working on it. Another thing that we get asked about are earth science simulations and whether or not we have earth science. Well, I can go back to our landing page here for simulations, and you'll notice we recently added a whole new category of earth sciences for those of you who teach earth science. And you'll see what we did, we took some cross-disciplinary simulations and added them in here in related simulations. And I'm very excited to say that we are always adding to those. We take very seriously the feedback we receive from teachers, and we have been consulting with about 500 different earth science teachers around the country and adding to those based on the scope and sequence of most high school earth science courses. So we were adding to those as well. I know that we were talking about LMSs earlier. It's important to note, some people ask about Google Classroom. We are also, we definitely integrate with Google Classroom. I know there was a question also regarding translated simulations. Yes, we are adding to those all the time. We started with Spanish because of the market in the US, and most bilingual situations involve Spanish language. So we started with Spanish. But we also have French, Italian, German, Brazilian, Portuguese as well. And we're always adding to those simulations.